regardless of consequences. And therefore we must be thankful that we have people like this in our day and time, from whom we can get the word straight, who will receive no rewards in this life. They will receive no money, they will receive no power, they will receive no positions. In fact, they lose all those things when they speak. So when we see people who are willing to speak like that and give up all worldly goods, we should be thankful, and that should increase our iman, our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the enemies of Islam have penetrated into every level of our society, and they have succeeded for a great number of the Muslim population of the world in destroying the firm reality of Islam. And they've turned Islam into something that is flexible and malleable according to what their concept of Western or modernization or secularization is. They've done something that the Crusades, the colonial occupations were unable to do, which is remove the reality of Islam in the hearts of Muslims and substitute in place of it an Islam that is pleasing to the forces of westernization or secularization. It is our duty as Muslims to establish our societies based on the law of Islam. It is our duty, if we're people of authority, to rule and judge by Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran in Sura Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verses 44, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمَ الْكَافِرُونَ. Whosoever does not judge, or whosoever does not rule by what Allah has revealed, such are unbelievers. Kafirun. Ibn Kathir in his tafsir relates the interpretation by the early generations, the scholars of the companions and their followers of this verse. For example, Ibn Mas'ud was asked about bribery, rashwa. He was asked, what is the ruling about bribery? He said, it is suht. That means it is something which is ill-got and forbidden. But then he was asked, well, what about in the case of judges? In other words, what if judges receive bribery? He said, that is kufr. And then he recited this verse. In the tafsir of At-Tabari, Ibn Jarir, he relates that As-Suddi, one of the scholars of Islam who died in the year 125 of the Hijrah, 128, pardon me, he said, whoever does not rule or judge by what Allah has revealed, if he does it on purpose and with knowledge, then he is an unbeliever. And Ibn Abbas said, whoever rejects what Allah has revealed is an unbeliever. And whoever accepts it but does not rule by it is an unjust sinner. ظَالِمٌ فَاسِقٌ. And Ibn Jarij, on the authority of Ata, said, kufr duna kufr, wa dhulmun duna dhulm, wa fisqun duna fisq. This explains that ruling or establishing a law other than the law of Islam is called kufr by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, and it was so interpreted by the Sahaba and the Salaf of this Ummah. But there are two kinds of kufr, as are explained in detail by the ulama in this subject. Kufr and Iman are two opposite forces. Belief and unbelief. Faith and rejection of faith. Sometimes kufr is so strong that it cancels out Iman. And sometimes kufr and Iman coexist within the hearts of people. But as Ibn al-Qayyim said, الحكم بما أنزل الله من شعب الإيمان والحكم بغير ما أنزل الله من شعب الكفر. Ruling or judging according to the revelation of Allah is one of the branches of faith, Iman. And ruling by a law which is not revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or judging by a law which is not revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is one of the branches of kufr, or unbelief. Now, kufr is of two types, just as iman is also two types. Kufr by the words, al-qawl, and by action, amal. Words are two types also, with the words of the tongue and the words of the heart. Words of the tongue, of course, speaking the words of iman, saying la ilaha illallah, those are words of the tongue. Speaking words of kufr, denying the reality of Islam, is clear kufr, which carries somebody out of the religion of Islam, unless they were forced to do that by threat of death or something that forced them to repeat those words. Words of the heart are the i'tiqad, or the beliefs that are inside of the heart of the person. And the person who has kufr in their heart is an unbeliever to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and is not a Muslim. So it's possible that people will say words of iman, and yet in their hearts they do not believe. They have kufr in their hearts, and those people are outside of the millah. But we, of course, cannot look in at the words of at the interior of the heart. But we can look at the outward actions of people. Al-amal. There are two kinds of action also, inward actions and outward actions. The inward actions, for example, the intention, the niyyah. When we do an action, I can pray with the intention of praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or maybe I could pray for demonstration or teaching purposes. Well, when I prayed the first time, that was an act of worship, act of iman. The second time, it was instruction, but it was not an act of worship or an act of iman, demonstrating the actions of prayer without the intention of praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So kufr in action can be the intention in the heart of kufr, of not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and dedicating one's actions to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or it can be kufr of the outward body. So kufr can be in action, or it can be in words, or it can be in the heart. Kufr of actions could be, for example, insulting, disrespecting the Quran. Someone can demonstrate their kufr openly by showing disrespect to the Quran, stepping on it, spitting on it, as unbelievers have been known to do, for example. One can show kufr outwardly by words. For example, cursing Allah, cursing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, denying a clear law of Islam knowingly that it is a requirement of Muslims. For example, saying there are not 5 prayers a day obligatory. A person who says, for example, I do not have to pray a particular prayer, is a kafir by his words, openly, and is outside of the faith of Islam. So it's incorrect for someone to say that kufr can only be in the heart. Kufr can be committed outwardly by the actions, such as insulting the mushaf, destroying mosques, and other things that the enemies of Islam do, or in the words, cursing Allah, cursing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, denying the truth of things which are known to every Muslim man, woman, and child, such as 5 daily prayers, fasting Ramadan, or the pilgrimage, or any of the laws of Islam knowingly. So if a person, for example, is ignorant of some of the laws of Islam and denies one of the particular laws unknowingly, so for example, he says, in Islam there's no concept of the enslavement of prisoners, for example, out of ignorance. But then when that person finds out there are laws covering those aspects in Islam, then he repents of what he said. That person is not a kafir. But if he knows, for example, that in Islam there are particular prayers and particular days of fasting, and he denies those things, then he is a kafir. Similarly, with the one who rules by something other than the Islamic law. If someone in ignorance, for example, says, in Islam we do not do things like cutting off of hands, for example, out of ignorance, that person is not a kafir. But if after reading the Quran and knowing the penalty for stealing, when it's been established according to the laws of Islam, is to have the hand cut off, and then he denies that, and that person is a kafir, he's not a Muslim. And if a person is a ruler and denies that the Islamic law applies in his kingdom or his state, that person is a kafir and is not a Muslim. He's openly denying